We begin here at home, of course, where the House of Representatives Committee on Constitution Review says that it has received a proposal for the creation of 31 new states in addition to the existing 36 in the country. Chairman of the committee and Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Benjamin Kalu, disclosed this to members while reading a letter from the committee clerk during Wednesday's plenary. He says the committee has received a proposal for additional 6 new states in the North Central, 4 in the Northeast, 5 in the Northwest, 5 in the Southeast, 4 in the South-South, and 7 in the Southwest.
The committee has reviewed the proposals for the creation of new states in accordance with Section 8, Subsection 1 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. This section outlines specific requirements that must be fulfilled to initiate the process of state creation, which include the following. New state and boundaries. 1. An act of the National Assembly for the purpose of creating a new state shall only be passed if a request supported by at least 2/3 majority of members representing the area demanding the creation of the new state in each of the following, namely, the Senate and the House of Representatives, the House of Assembly in respect of the area, and the Local Government Council in respect of the area, is received by the National Assembly. Local government. Advocates for the creation of additional local government area are only reminded that Section 8 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as amended, applies to this process. Specifically, in the accordance with Section 8.3 of the Constitution, the outcome of the votes of the state houses of assembly and the referendum must be forwarded to the National Assembly for further legislative action.
All right. Well, I believe the front page of this day describes this move as a show of unseriousness.
That was an interesting headline. Now, the House, through the spokesperson, Honorable Akin Rotimi, has come out with a statement to clarify some of the grey areas, saying that no, it's a private member's bill, not the representation of the House. A private member's bill is simply that an individual or group would channel their request through a member of the House to present what they would want to present a bill to the floor, and this is what's happened. So it's not a reflection of the House, or perhaps not even a reflection of the person, of the member who's passed this bill or who's proposed this bill for consideration. However, this is not the first time this agitation or call for creation of new states has come. In 2024, it was reported that it had passed second reading for the creation of states, Anioma State, which is still being pushed, by the way, by Senator Ned Nwoko. It is a state in Abia State, Anambra, Ebonyi, and Enugu. A number of them had come to ask, to demand for the creation of new states. But there have also been a lot of conversation around this with regards to the pros and cons of creation of new states. We currently have 36 states in Nigeria. And what some people are saying is that if this is passed, as well, 31 new states, according to the House, they're saying they had 31 proposals for creation of new states. So just that clarity there. So what some people have said is that creation of new states will bring governance closer to the people. In some instances, they've even argued that it might even mean more jobs for the people, because when we have new states, we have a creation of new state civil service, and of course, more employment for people. But then the cons almost seem to outweigh the pros, especially at this time in our nation. The first thing is that, number one, more states would mean an increased size of the government. This same size that we're trying to trim because of a lack of resources currently. Number one, we'll have a bigger National Assembly, when we're still asking that we trim the size of the National Assembly, because each of these new states would have to have representation in the House. The second is also that we'll have more ministers. According to the principle of federal character, at least each of the states would have to have a representation from their state. We'd also have, of course, more spending in terms of more local government areas created. And the argument is that a lot of states that we have currently are not even viable. In fact, some have been described as insolvent. And so we need to address those challenges, first of all, before we begin to talk about creation of new states. In 2023, there was a report that came out about how some states depended solely heavily on FAC allocations, and we're not even able to internally generate 10% of the allocations that were given to them by the federal government. So really still controlled by the center, not able to stand on its own. Some states are still unable to pay minimum wage. How then would you justify breaking up and even having more states and making it more convoluted? So a number of things to create. So some people have even said, let's go back to the before the creation of states in late 1960s to regional governments, and that Nigeria worked better, in that way. But the conversation continues. We'll see this will pass. The deputy speaker there has spoken about the process by which these states must be created. So it's not just Uhuru, just as yet.
Okay, the creation of states has a history. First, it was the military, right, that divide Nigeria, moved from the regional government to a state structure when Yakubu Gowon took over. And the whole idea was simply to make it impossible for any region in Nigeria to say, oh, we'll move away from Nigeria. So from 12 states, we increased to 19. We then moved over the years to 36 states. The atomization of the Nigerian state, as it were. Now, but the major problem that we have had with the creation of states is that the ethnic issue, the geographical issue came in. Everybody now wanted a state. Why? Because of access to federal allocation to oil wealth. Because the more states you have, the more local governments you will have, and then the more money you will take out of the national patrimony. In other words, the whole idea of state creation is about what can we get out of the national cake. This national cake mentality is what has continued to sabotage Nigeria. And hence, you still have many of the states, Anoma State, whatever state, Okun State, all of them thinking that if they have their own state, they have more access to the national patrimony. In Ogun State, I think there's some talk also about Ijebu State. Now we have 36 states. Most of these 36 states are unviable. A state like Ekiti State, how much do they get? Some of these other states, how much do they get? Okay? Now you want to increase that to 67 states. You want to increase the centers of unseriousness, mediocrity, lack of productivity in this same space called Nigeria. And you want to increase the number of states to 67. 31 plus 36 will give you 67. That is why this day newspaper took an editorial position and reported that this is a show of unseriousness. And I agree. It's a show of unseriousness. It's a show of stupidity. And what the House of Representatives did yesterday, Kalu, who presided over the meeting, may say, well, this is just procedural. But no, it's an absolute demonstration of idiocy. And I think it must be a tragedy for Nigeria to have stupid people sitting in the House of Representatives and pushing stupid proposals. So that's why I agree with this day newspaper that this is a show of unseriousness. Because all of these states, many of them are unviable. In fact, there is a tendency, there are people who are saying that, look, most of these states should be abolished. They should be merged. We should have a more compact federation system. There's one country, I think, Brazil, as big as Brazil is, with 203 million population. They have 26 states. They are not talking of expanding. Nigerians are always looking for how to get their hands on the money. These states in Nigeria, we must make the argument, must become centers of productivity, not centers of consumption of federal allocation within the Nigerian constitution. In any case, I do not think that this will succeed because you still need the concurrence of the houses of assembly, two-thirds of them, and the ethnic politics will play out and sabotage the process. I also think that, look, if you look at the distribution, 15 new states will be created in the north. The North alone will take 15 states. The South will take 12 states. South will get 5. Southwest will get 7. That's 12. That in itself is a prescription for chaos. Because you have leaders in the South who will say, okay, so these Northerners, you are going to create more local governments and collect more money. So I think this idea is it's a wrong-headed idea. And I think that they need more intelligent people in that House of Representatives. Even if they are saying they are following due process. They are quoting Section 8 of the 1999 Constitution, which talks about the creation of states and boundaries.
Absolutely. This conversation is a distraction at best to take us away from the critical issues. When I hear stories such as this, I always revert back to one of my favorite philosophies that I repeat day in and day out, which is Fanonism. And Fanonism ultimately says that colonialism was a psychological project. That project ensured that the black man would see a fellow black man as an inferior race. And we begin to see ourselves as an inferior race, and we now begin to fight amongst ourselves for resources, for all the unprogressive things as black people, whether it's between tribe and tribe or between this and that. And what colonialism also did is that they just did a cut and paste of areas they thought were convenient for them and bunched a group of people together. Some people who never ever would have coexisted if you look at the previous empires and so forth that existed. However, we're here today and we will make the most of it. And by making the most of it is not by looking for more ways to cut and chop and divide ourselves to advance our own personal good. It is look at the broader sense of a greater good. Now, this is a very, very dangerous and sensitive rhetoric, and we need to perish it at this moment. Why do I say this? Because if you look at the state of the Democratic Republic of Congo at the moment, the eastern part of Congo, the real issues there lie around tribal issues. The fact that Mobutu Sese Seko came and brought a group of people who are a minority and put them in one area of the country, and those people started feeling marginalized and created their own army force and are now fighting for what they call freedom fighters' rights alongside with Rwanda. So this is the challenge with these artificial borders that were created, along with the psychological mentality that feels that, oh, as black people, we now need to fight each other for the national cake. How can this be the topic of conversation when we're supposed to be looking at ways to make our states work? Lagos, Rivers, Akwa Ibom are the only self-sufficient states in Nigeria. Every other state is operating on a deficit, running to fact, barely raising investment. We barely hear of business development activities happening in those countries, in those states, excuse me. Everything is always centered around what can we get from the center. Now, it's so convenient that we speak of federalism and wanting to have self-determination when it comes to empowering ourselves and our people. But when it comes to the principles of federalism that say that we need to be in charge of our own economic prosperity, suddenly we forget that federalism is what we clamored for. So there needs to be a balance around that, and the hypocrisy really needs to come to an end. And I sure do hope that the National Assembly perish this conversation as soon as possible.